Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2 of The Ripple Effect. I'm Joel Russo, along here with my co-host Ian Zumbach.
Hey everybody.
This show is brought to you once again by Old Bear Records and Emphasis Films, so thank you to all of those wonderful people. Today we have a very special guest with us, who I'm going to give you over to Ian in a second to introduce our special guest. But first of all, I want to remind you that tonight's show is live as usual, so please, on Facebook Live, give us your questions. We will read some on the air. We will not neglect you and your well thought out and appropriate questions. So please send those in. We'll be reading them through the entire broadcast. Ian Zumbach.
Hey everybody. Well, I'm really excited to have a good friend and guest with us tonight, Kurtis Parks. Kurtis has become a really good friend to me over the past year. He is a pastor of Bridges, Nashville. It's a church here, a new church that started up this year. And he is a, incredibly experienced songwriter, producer, worship leader. He's got an incredible story, and we're really excited to have you here tonight, Kurtis. So let's welcome Kurtis tonight.
Woo! Good to be here. Good to be here.
So, if you don't mind, I'd like to jump right into it.
Let's do this thing.
All right. So, I said I've known Kurtis for a year, and we've become fast friends, done a lot of life together in a short period of time. But as I was preparing for tonight, I discovered that you were a top 50 finalist on American Idol in season 4, I believe. Right?
Way back.
Way back.
Original judges.
Right. Way back. So OG judges. So I couldn't let
OJs.
That's right. So I couldn't let this opportunity to pass by. So I guess for our audience, through that experience, I mean, you hear so many different stories of what people learn coming out of an experience like going and auditioning for American Idol. What did you take away from it? What was your experience like, and what helped propel you into this next season of music from that?
Yeah, it was such a long time ago, man. This was season 4. Carrie Underwood won that season.
Okay.
So I didn't stand a chance. You know, like if Carrie's on, everybody else is up a creek without a paddle.
Yeah.
But it was crazy, man. 23,000 people auditioned for the show in Washington, D.C. I was one of 23,000, one of 24 that made it to Hollywood. And man, you have cameras in your face all the time, nonstop, and they catch a lot of silly stuff. But, you know, I went all the way to the end of Hollywood Week, and so it was like the groups episode where, they give you 6 songs to choose from. We picked a Barry Manilow song, and I've never listened to Barry Manilow in my life, so that was a big mistake. And we were the only group to pick this Barry Manilow song. And so the craziest thing was we forgot all the words. We just threw some dance moves together. And that happened to be like the 15 minutes of fame that I was known for on that show. Forgetting all the words, putting together some ridiculous dance moves.
Oh, man.
And but I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the music industry. And I just remember, this is back when they put the finalists into 4 rooms. And they kept 2 rooms and they let 2 rooms go. And I was one of the rooms that they let go. And man, there were people in the room that were just like, my life is over, like, this is it, this is my one big shot. And I just kind of realized in that moment, like, it's gonna be all right. I was 22, and I got on the phone with my dad, called him from Hollywood, and I just said, look, Dad, I got cut, I'm not going any further. And he said something to me in that moment that literally just picked me up off the floor. He said, Kurtis, if this isn't what God has for you, just imagine what he does. And I just remember hearing that phrase, and I was like, all right, like, let's not sulk, let's not cry about this, because I was devastated, that was 55 million viewers watched that season. Like, it was the most watched season of all time. And so I thought, man, this is the shot. But you know what? Went back home, and I just kind of had a renewed passion to do something with music. And I think that's really what the show fueled in me.
Wow.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's literally my worst nightmare. You're describing on TV and forgetting the words. I feel for you so hard.
Yeah, it was rough, man. There was a funny part though, because it was like we had to memorize the lyrics to this song, and Ryan Seacrest came up to our group, and the 3 of us, we all had like Italian in our blood, so they called us the Goodfellas. I guess they thought we were mobsters or something. I don't know. But Ryan is like, Are you guys going to pull it together? And I don't know where I came up with this, but I told Ryan, and this was on the show, but I was like, great things come together last minute. I said, Abraham Lincoln wrote the Gettysburg Address on the way to Gettysburg. We're going to get this thing. I don't know where I came up with that. I guess I was paying attention to history class.
Oh, man, yeah.
So I came up with that, and we forgot the words. And so, it didn't pull through for me. But.
I love how anticlimactic
Right.
that
Big
line
setup.
becomes. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, so going back even further, I assume, where before you were 22, where did you start to play music? Where did you get bit by that bug? And when, if you could tell us how you started playing music, and then just up to when did you start to make it an actual career or a choice that your career is kind of floated around or whatever?
Yeah. 13 years old, my dad actually I'll go back, 11 years old, my dad must have heard me singing Disney songs around the house. And so he's like, he was in the process of about to start a church in Roanoke, Virginia. And he came up to me and said, I feel like I want you to try to start learning music because I would love for you to be our worship leader. And I don't know if it was because free labor or maybe he saw some potential in there, but he called out something that just instilled in me. I'm like, all right, yeah, I love singing, I love music, let's do this. So I started taking piano lessons at 11 years old, started writing songs at 13, started leading worship at 14. Joined my first rock band, mostly covering Chili Peppers songs at 15. Nice. And I just did bands all throughout high school, all throughout college. And then it was right after college, went on to American Idol and came back from the show, back to our hometown, had a whole series of just festivals and shows lined up. And that's kind of where we put together a legit band and we started going on the road and playing shows. And then I was living in Roanoke, put together this band, and we sent demos out to just any producer we could get their address. And actually sent a producer down here in Nashville our record, and he loved it. He said, come down. And he ended up signing us to a production deal. So that's when we first moved down in 2005. And that's when I would really say, music became more of a career than just a dream,
Man, so just out of curiosity, so the whole group moved down to Nashville with you at the time, or?
Yeah, the group was 4 of us. 2 of us were like, we want to do this,
Yeah.
There was a couple of guys that I think it was more of a hobby.
Sure.
And so we wanted to all move down, but 2 guys stayed back in Virginia, and so then just 2 of us came down. And then that was my buddy, his name is Josh Kim. And incredible guitarist, great songwriter. And we were a band that was called The Season. And so that group, we brought a couple guys on later on down the road and did it old school. We bought a 97 40 Econoline van.
Man.
Rented a U-Haul trailer every time we went out. Our very first show, we drove up to Knoxville to play this hole-in-the-wall spot called the Prince Deli Sports Bar. And we played a 3-hour show. I think we made $75.
Man.
And we blew out the back axle because our van wasn't rated to pull a trailer. And I mean, we're like, this is a van. They can do anything. This thing's got track lighting in it. There's a PlayStation 1 with Tiger Woods Golf. We're ready to go. Let's go on tour.
How could this
ever fail?
Yeah. Right.
First show, we blow out the back differential. It's like, all right.
And so when you called your dad, what did your dad say that time?
What's wrong with you, man? You got to check the specs on your cars, man.
I would love it if he said the same thing. He's like, Curtis, just think.
Just imagine.
Not this. Just imagine.
If not a Ford Econoline van, just imagine what car God has.
If not Tiger Woods PGA Golf.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait for that PS4 to come out.
What was a favorite Chili Peppers song that you covered in that band in high school?
Oh, man. I was obsessed with the Californication record.
Okay.
So anything off of that, I mean, we probably did all those songs. Scar Tissue was the best. So, yeah.
Right on.
Man.
It's all about it. And I had long hair, so I got people were like, you're Anthony Kiedis Jr.,
You were the singer.
and I took that. That's a great compliment, man.
Yeah.
The guy's like 60 and he's
in really good shape.
incredible shape, man.
He also never wears a shirt.
That's true. I think I never did that.
Probably
move.
in his record label.
Yeah.
His record
It's in the
contract.
contract.
That he can't ever get.
Right.
Chili Peppers, man.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Amazing. So, I mean, you've got so much experience. I mean, you've written over 1,200 songs. You've produced
20 of them good.
Well, still, you've got 1,200 in the catalog. It's pretty amazing.
That's not
50 albums that you've been involved in producing, multiple collectives and creative collectives that you've worked with. And with that much experience and having lived in Nashville now twice, it's your second time here, there's so many people that move here to this area that have a song in their heart, a couple bucks in their pocket, and a dream to make it. So if you were sitting in front of yourself before you're about to make that move, what would be some really valuable and practical advice you could give yourself or somebody that's out there considering to make that move that they should know before they move to a town like Nashville?
Oh man, just give up, man. Just give up. No, I think if I could talk to myself before I moved here, I'd say three things. Number one, seek God more than you seek opportunity. I think so many times, we kind of tend to take music as a dog-eat-dog world. And man, I've just learned over the years, Matthew 6:33, it's one of those verses that's like the secret to life. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. So I think oftentimes we get that backwards. We want to seek all these things. We want to seek opportunities. We want to find that special contact, and we put God on the back burner. And if I could tell myself at a younger version, just, hey, you seek God, an opportunity will find you. There's not a contact that he doesn't have. Number two, I would say promote others more than you promote yourself. I think in music, as in many different industries, it's like you got to champion yourself. And so just self-promotion was everything when we were starting. And it kind of gets old. It wears yourself down. And I started to realize, like, as we befriended other bands, we actually found ourselves gaining in popularity. Like when we started promoting other bands and we started joining the bills and sharing our fans with others, it just got a lot more fun. And so I think that's one of the things that I love about all the different collectives that I've been involved with, from the One Worship Collective to National Community Church with our 8 campuses, and now in the Old Bear family. It's like, it's just a lot funner when you can do it with a community and promote others, and then you find yourselves getting lifted by that. So that's the second thing. I think the third thing would be everything's going to be okay. I think, when you're young and you're just like looking at everything through rose-colored lenses, and it's like, man, if I don't make the most of this, like even American Idol, if I don't make the most of this, it's done, and man, God always has another chapter to write in your story. There's always, I told somebody this last week, but it's, you look at your days and it's like, look, at the end of the day, my head's going to hit the pillow. We're going to start over tomorrow. God's mercies are new every day. So it's going to be all right. Don't put all your eggs in one basket and think, if I mess this show up or if I mess this co-write up, it's done. You're going to be all right. You're going to be all right.
It reminds me, and personally, in my story, I felt like I was spinning my wheels for a long time. And it was at a point where I decided that I would be just as excited to champion other people if they were sharing the gospel and they were the instrument of sharing songs and sharing music about Jesus. So long as people were hearing the message, then that was, I should be just as happy as if I were the one that was sharing the message. And that's when the doors really started to open for me. And so make some great points there and corroborate your story. So I think at this point, guys, we're going to take a quick commercial break. And we're going to come back in a few minutes. We've got Kurtis Parks here. Again, send in some questions. If you have questions while you're watching the broadcast live, we'll answer some of those questions for you. Tonight's topic, we're talking about Hymn Like, which is Kurtis's new album. It's coming out on Old Bear Records on October 19th. We're talking about the topic of adaptability, which Kurtis has a ton of experience in. And so just stay tuned. We'll be right back with you momentarily.
Time slips by, and before you know it, days turn to years, and the unrecorded art becomes nothing but a memory, and sometimes even forgotten. My name is Ryan Clare. I'm not only a singer-songwriter, I'm a husband and a father. I'm a worship pastor dedicated to sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's the undying desire and passion within me to share my songs with the world. These are songs of hope.
Into the wall of the basement he calls home.
Dear friend, don't worry about
So to me, the theme of the table is truly an invitation to listeners to come and interact with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And when you look at the Gospels, Jesus often, in his most intimate interactions, you'd find him at a table around his disciples or sharing the things of God with people through a meal. And we've sort of set this 10-course meal through 10 songs that allow us to gather around a table just like he did and have this very intimate sort of experience. And so that's why it's really important to me, because I believe that God is very much about intimate relationship, and the person of Jesus Christ demonstrates that through his life. And so as we set the trajectory of the song selection and the sound and the approach and the aesthetic of it, we wanted it to be a very intimate experience for listeners to feel that they could be like right in the room with Jesus, interacting with truths.
There are times when I feel like a beggar. My pride won't let me receive.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Ripple Effect. If you're just tuning in, we've got our good friend Kurtis Parks with us tonight. We're talking about adaptability, and we're talking about his upcoming album, Hymn Like, that's coming out on Old Bear Records on October 19th. We're already having a great time. We encourage you, if you're just tuning in, to send in some questions. If you have questions for us, we'll be answering those during the broadcast. And so now we're going to get into the topic of talking more about Hymn Like. So Joel,
Yeah.
why don't you start us off with some questions?
And if you stick around till the end of the episode,
Yes.
we have some exciting stuff coming up with the Ripple Effect that we are just dying to share with you. So please stick with us till then. So Kurtis, it's called Hymn Like, this new project. How many songs are on it? It's
10 songs.
10 songs,
Yep.
and they're all hymns that you have in various ways kind of arranged, updated, and recorded in some really cool ways. Tell us about just how did you decide to do this? And tell us a little bit about the production and recording process of this.
Yeah, I didn't grow up with hymns. In fact, until I was about 21, the only hymn I knew was Amazing Grace. And so it wasn't really until moving to Washington, D.C., I was a worship pastor at a church called National Community Church, and it was a melting pot of who was in the seats. We had, Methodists next to Presbyterians, next to Pentecostals, next to Catholics, next to atheists. So you just had so many people from all different backgrounds, and hymns were the one type of song that just people kind of lit up. Like the roof would come off when we did, Come Thou Fount or Be Thou My Vision, or any hymn that kind of brought back that nostalgia of early church and tradition. And so I fell in love with the hymns in DC, and I just began to learn hymns, and I would, we basically did a message-themed song at the end of every service. And so sometimes we'd end with a hymn, and I'd never heard the hymn before. So I would look up on Google, like, okay, what's a cool version of Oh for a Thousand Tongues? And if I didn't find any, I would just kind of go home and with my acoustic, look up the old school lyrics and try to put a new arrangement to it. And so I just started doing that over and over again with songs. And then in 2013, I got asked to be a part of a project with Integrity called One, a Worship Collective. And I had written a hymn with Kelly Minter, who's an incredible writer down here. And that song was called Set My Eyes on You. And it's kind of a modern hymn. So it's an original hymn. It's actually on the Hymn Like album. And it got on this one album that we did back in 2013. And then I just started getting calls like, hey, do you have any more hymns like that? And churches started to call, and we started to do more hymns at our church in DC. And so I was just, before I knew it, I was neck deep in this rich history of theology and song that were hymns. And I just fell in love with hymnology. Hymnology, is that it?
It could be.
The study of hymns. You can put ology behind any word, and it's the study of that word, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So hymnology. Yeah. But I just began to dive into some of the stories behind these songs. Like, Amazing Grace was written by John Newton, who was a former slave trader in the British Navy, and he found Jesus and his whole life changed. And he was actually a part of the huge abolitionist movement in the UK. Stories like George Bernard, who wrote The Old Rugged Cross, and it was introduced in 1917 in a conference where Billy Sunday preached, and the song just went global before there was Twitter. Right? It was amazing stories of these songs. And so I just began to study about the songs, and I fell in love with them. And then I started writing new choruses and different arrangements and writing my own hymns. And so 2015 at our church, we released a version of Christ the Lord is Risen Today, and it just blew up, like 250,000 views on YouTube. And so I kind of, at that moment, I was kind of like, okay, I think we've got something with these hymns. And more churches just started getting interested in doing the old hymns. And then you're kind of seeing this younger generation just fall in love with the old tradition of the church. And so it's kind of this perfect storm of all of that. And then I found myself at the end of the day, I was like, I think I've got like 10 songs. And so I've got a studio here in Nashville and I produced the record, had some incredible players on it. Brian Beal from Big Daddy Weave played drums on it. Christian Wood, an awesome instrumentalist here in town. Charlie Lowell from Jars of Clay played keys on it. Had some awesome vocalists and just got to co-write with some amazing friends. And here we are, 11 days out from releasing it. So it's exciting, man.
That's really, I mean, that's really interesting to hear. So it's been like 5 years.
Pretty much,
making basically like that you've been assembling these different arrangements and stuff. You probably didn't think at the beginning that you'd be able to like compile them all for an entire release centered around that.
Well, I never, it's funny, like when I wrote that first hymn, I never thought of myself as a hymns guy. Like, I'm tattooed. I want to be the rock and roll guy, you know? Like give me a distortion pedal and, you know, a Schecter and we'll do this
You
thing.
want to be the Anthony Kiedis of worship.
Oh, well, that's it, man. You know, I want to go crazy. And, but I don't know, like, I found myself like accidentally stumbling backwards into being the hymn guy. And now, you know, pastoring a church, like, I love any moment we get to do hymns and I love to just, it's one of those things where it's like, some songs you really try hard to teach through the song. Hymns you don't have to try hard. Like, it's just so jam-packed with truth that it's amazing. Yeah.
That's, you know, it's interesting. I think there are a lot of parallels in our culture nowadays with just with young kids. You're talking about how much they're relating to that, and just things that have kind of been proven and things that are maybe kind of old school or retro. You know, everyone knows that. Retro is so in right now, you know, and like antiques.
So hot right now.
Yeah, so hot. But like it's really interesting. There's this authenticity and depth there that I think that I feel like probably it's not. I'm sure it's not just kids. I'm sure that it's people of all ages. But you know, I think people are getting kind of burnt out a little bit on some of the newer worship stuff. Some of it being that it's a lot of it sounds the same, you know.
Right.
And but a lot of it, you know, just that it's going, you know, it's in this one direction, and the hymns just seem to be kind of the opposite direction. And that doesn't mean that these modern worship songs are bad or are inferior, but like the majority of what we hear are these, and the hymns are such a palate cleanser. You know, they are like, they're I'm trying to think of an analogy of eating. They are that
water.
I like that water.
Water.
They are the water. Yes. after
living water.
Yes, they are the living water that washes it all down, and you're like, oh, okay, I can take another bite.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting, as you were talking, I was, one of the reasons I love hymns is because they help us remember. I mean, these songs, some of them are 300 or 400 years old. In fact, Be Thou My Vision, it was actually an 8th century poem in Ireland.
That's amazing.
That was translated, you know, in the 1900s by Mary Byrne into English, and now that we have it in that stanza form. But it's kind of cool because one of the things I've heard a pastor say, I can't remember who said it, but it was like, we're educated beyond our ability to obey. Like, we know so much. And most of what we need to be learning is just stuff that we've already learned. We just need to be reminded. Reminded of the truth, reminded of the past. Like, and you know, Jesus, 66 times throughout the scripture is the word remember. Like, God was always trying to get his people to remember. Why? Because we're forgetful. You know, like, look at the Israelites. You know, like, if I saw the Red Sea parting, I don't think I'd ever forget that. But like, just days after that, it's like complaining and like forgetting the miracles. And I think with songs, it's the same. Like, we have such a rich tradition of songs, and yet a lot of us songwriters, the danger is like, I need to write the next thing. And it's like, maybe just once, let's pause and let's look back to what's been written and see if we can bring that today and just give new legs to it. And so I think that's kind of one of those subconscious things I wanted to do with him, was like, let's just remember for a moment, like
Yeah.
these songs, like this last Christmas, I did like a quick like 4 or 5 show run up in central PA, and we played these 200 and 300 year old churches. And I just remember being there, and outside of one of them was a plaque that said, Home Church of P.P. Bliss. And P.P. Bliss was the guy that wrote the music to It Is Well with My Soul. And so I just remember like playing the show in this church, and I just kind of took in the moment. I'm like, how many songs have soaked into these walls? Over the 250 years that this church has stood here. And so I just felt like it was a moment of just remembering like great hymn writers and Christians that have gone on before us. And that's so much of the Christian faith, even in the Last Supper, Jesus said, do this in remembrance of me. Yeah. That's why communion is so special. It's like, let's remember more and not feel the pressure to have to continue to it's not saying don't create, because we're created to create. Like, don't hear me in saying that, but it's also, I think sometimes we just need to pause and reflect and remember where we've been, and that will help us see where we're going,
You're talking about like singing in that church and that tradition of singing these songs, and how many songs. Like, I think that's one of the really interesting things with hymns that I appreciate the most, is that that at some point it was written because someone had to hear these words. Someone had to hear, "Come thou fount of every blessing, tune thy heart to sing thy grace." And when you are reading these words, and especially when you're singing them, you're realizing, that you're singing these words just as these generation after generation after generation after generation felt the need to A, write these words, but B, sing them as well, this whole time. That is such an incredible tradition that it's almost like time travel, or it's saying that like the issues that we have now, or I should say the message that is healing our wounds now was at work then as well.
Right.
And that's pretty crazy, because we tend to think about us having completely different sets of problems and thoughts and issues as people 250 years ago. Mm-hmm. But it really brings you back to be like, oh no, we haven't learned anything new.
Right,
we're just still we're figuring it out just like they were.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
And the other thing that's to me is so appropriate about a project like this, too, is that for one, you have so many inclinations towards teaching, that through hymns there's such a teaching of Scripture and theology through the songs, and then the redemptive quality of the fact that a lot of them, you've talked about this before, were actually sort of modeled after songs that were being sung in bar rooms in particular areas. What a cool sort of component to it, that this redemptive purpose of drawing, you're basically going from the bar to the altar with these songs, which is very, very cool. I love that.
And it always cracks me up because I think sometimes, like, with the modern sound and worship, with, I say this, I'm going to sound really old, but like electric guitars and drums in modern worship, which is still a new concept for some denominations and whatnot. But it's like, this isn't worship, But it's like, that's what they were telling the hymn writers, because they were taking bar tunes and putting Christian theology to it. And back in that day and age, in the 1700s and 1800s, this is hypocrisy. This is, heathen music. So I just think it's funny, because like, why can't we sing the old hymns? Once upon a time, this was blasphemy in the church.
I remember hearing, I don't remember where I heard this, so hopefully this isn't apocryphal, but someone told me one time that the organ, which most people think of as just the
Holy of Holies.
Yes. This, I mean, it is the Holy of Holies, right? It is the voice of the Holy Spirit in the church. Like, at some point in the very, very early church, having organs playing in church was like thought to be horrible, because the first organs were associated with like the torture of Christians, or with persecution at least of the faith. And so just imagine that, like going back that far to like that instrument that most people regard by at least Bach's time, was the church instrument. Like, it just shows that the farther you go back, I bet if you go farther enough back, you'll run into like hieroglyphics of electric guitars that were then. I'm just kidding.
You think?
Probably. Those Egyptian pharaohs were probably
I'll go with it.
rocking some flying V's.
You know, once upon a time,
Once upon a
David
time.
played the Fender Harpicaster. You know, it always goes back to electric guitars.
That was off the
Favorite
top of your
harpist,
dome?
yeah.
That's amazing.
Man,
That's
you
why I
know,
love this guy.
that was good.
It's really
I'm
good.
trying over here.
Much respect.
Golly. Well, I guess, I mean, you've really talked about why this is such an important project to you, the Hymn Like project. I guess my next question would be, in the times that we live in, there are things you've basically taken these hymns and you've added choruses to some of them, and so you've adapted some of the old historical traditional style hymn and you've brought some new elements into that. I guess from the side of a producer and the side of a performer and leader of music, why was that important to adapt like some of these new elements into this project for you?
I think anything that you can breathe new life into old truth is really cool. So, that's why the Message version is so, I think it hits hard. It's because it's saying the timeless
Disruptive.
truth. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's saying the timeless truth that we've all grown up with in a new way. I have this thing that I live my life by. It's a phrase I heard when I was 12 years old in church. It says, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always be what you've always been. And so you talk about the theme of adaptability. Adaptability is defined as, the ability to adjust to new conditions. So it happens in nature, as we go through the seasons. It happens in culture with architecture, style, clothing, right? And it happens in industry. I mean, look at the music industry in Nashville. 50 years ago, we're all listening to 8 tracks. And then 40 years ago, it's tape cassettes, then it's CDs, then it's the MP3, and now it's everything streaming. So there's nothing in our world that doesn't have a demand for adaptability. If there's one thing that's constant, it's change. That's on like a bumper sticker somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think, when it comes to music and how we hear it and how we listen to it, yes, it's always changing. I mean, there's now synths that didn't exist, 20 years ago. There's software now that didn't exist 10 years ago. There's new plugins coming out all the time. But there's something about certain elements of music that stand that test of time. So I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
You put an upright piano next to a processed, whatever software, I'll take that upright piano 9 times out of 10.
Sure,
It's the same with the Rhodes. It's the same with, it's just something about the organic beauty of something you can't touch it. And I think about that with the hymns. It's like these songs have stood the test of time. I'll probably write songs and nobody's going to remember the name of Kurtis Parks when I'm gone. I mean, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but here we are singing songs by the Wesley brothers, Fanny Crosby, John Newton, Isaac Watts. I mean, these are guys that have carried the message of the church for hundreds of years. Their songs have outlived them. And that's one of my prayers for I think that's legacy, right? Like that your songs and your messages and your life will outlive you and it will outlast you. And I think that's one of the things that it just made it so important for me to take some of these songs and maybe just give them a facelift. Let's put this new hook in there, or like with Christ the Lord, that like new chorus of He's not dead, He's alive. We have this hope in Jesus Christ. Just something that kind of brings it into a pop sensibility.
Man, it's funny hearing you say that again. That thing about adaptability, or adaptability. How you have this the concept is kind of blowing my mind of writing a song and having truth in that song that's so good or that's so true and is so meaningful that that the song itself actually adapts. The song outlives you, and then other people adapt that song, and that means that song has legs so strong that it will continue. It has a life of its own, and that that people will change it out, people will dress it up, people will do these different things to it, and that's amazing. I mean, it makes you think about the intentionality of writing a song and kind of what goes into that, and how serious we treat it, as songwriters. That's pretty remarkable thing, something that we don't talk about a lot. We are going to take another commercial break, but we will see you here again on the other side of it.
Yes.
And thanks for tuning in. Again, we have some exciting news about the ripple effect coming up
Yes,
at
we
the
do.
end of the show, so stick around.
What can wash away my sin? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. What can make me whole again? Nothing but the blood of Jesus. Thou in me dwelling, and I with thee one. Open my eyes to see what your eyes see. Open my heart to follow where you lead. Riches I heed not, nor land. This world may be a fallen place, blind to hope, in need of grace. Though the storms they seldom cease, you will harbor me in peace. Through the trials of this age, you are the friend who stills the waves. When my fears against me rise, I will set my eyes on you.
Hey everybody, we're back talking with Kurtis Parks about his new album, Hymn Like. Just hymns are kind of blowing our minds right now. It's cool stuff, cool stuff. Hundreds of years of history and tradition.
Yes.
It's really cool. Something that we're kind of asking all of our guests on this show that we have, which you are the second. So this is now a tradition of our own.
Love it.
Is what is a lesson that you have learned from failure in your career that you know that you couldn't have learned from success? This is really important, I think.
Yeah.
For both of us, this is something that we talk about a lot. Yeah. Something that where it didn't go the way that you thought, and then maybe in retrospect you look back and you say, "Wow, this felt awful. It felt like I was failing. It felt like I was doing something wrong." And now you look back and maybe you see that there's some stuff going on behind the scenes that really worked out.
Yeah, I think about the first time I moved to Nashville, 2005. We were offered a record deal. I was married 4 months, came down here with my new wife and our band, and found out the record deal never existed. And so we had moved our entire life for this, and it felt like a huge fail. It felt like we had been cheated. It felt like, wrong place, wrong time kind of moment. But, hindsight's 2020. You always look back and you asked the question earlier, like, what would you tell your younger self? Sometimes it's like, man, I don't know if I would have changed anything, because what's led me to this point were all of these other moments. The butterfly effect. You change one thing here, and like a billion light years over here, it's somehow affected by that. And it's kind of like, man, I don't know. I think there's those moments where. Two life verses that I've tried to live by: Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge Him, and He'll direct your path. Who do you trust? In those moments of failing, in those moments where it feels like the ground just got ripped out from beneath you, that's where you really find out, the rubber meets the road. Who do you trust? Do you trust in yourself more than God? Do you trust in your relationships more than your relationship? It's like, and those are moments that will really put the fire to your butt. It's like you feel the heat, and it's like, man, okay, who do I trust? And where is my faith really? Because when everything's smooth sailing, when you're just crushing it and the world is all sunshine and rainbows, it's easy to trust God because you can see Him in everything. Right. When the lights go dark and it's like, wow, what just happened? That's really where trust and faith in the unseen is needed. So I think, honestly, moments of failure really show us where our trust is. and if we need a course correction in our faith. And then the other life verse is Romans 8:28. All things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his plans and purposes. It's actually, I've got a tattoo for when I left Nashville. I tattooed this verse in the Nashville skyline because I moved here to be a rock star. I left a worship leader. Like, it wasn't my plan to be singing music in the church. I wanted to be famous. I wanted to be a rock star. That's why I went on American Idol. I didn't plan on coming in second. Like, I wanted to be the American Idol, you know? And those are the moments where I realized I think I was asking Jesus to follow me more than I was following him. And, you know, there's just things that God will do. He'll prune you, you know? Like, I loved The Karate Kid. And there's that bonsai tree that's the theme throughout all those movies, the bonsai tree. And for that tree to grow strongest, they clip it, they prune it, and then it becomes this beautiful thing. But it's only through the pain of the tree that it grows. And so there's going to be moments in your life that they feel like failures. They feel like pain. That's good. It's a good thing because you will only grow to the level of your pain. And if you can't look past your pain, you're not going to grow. But I mean, it's like working out. They say literally when your muscles are building, they're tearing. But you're growing through the pain. So I don't know. I hope those two verses make sense in that context.
Yeah, you know? Healing can't happen without destruction.
I call it the promise with the pain. You know, you got both of those, and they're both going to happen.
Sounds like a song.
Come on, man. That's right.
So did the other one. I mean, it sounds like a heavy metal song. The one you just said.
No healing without destruction?
Yeah.
Destruction.
David Stain, are you watching?
Come on.
That is pretty good.
So we got a question for you here.
Okay.
From Julie Rhodes, and her question is, how was your experience sharing your faith while filming the show American Idol?
Yeah, so I got to be honest. You know, back in that moment at 22, I was probably a little more on the path of trying to be a rock star than trying to be a worship leader. Yeah. But I definitely had more moments looking back where I had. It's really living that Saint Francis of Assisi. You know, he said, "I preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words." There are times where people on the show would go out and do things that I just didn't ascribe to, and that was a witness because people would come up to me on the show, "Hey, why aren't you going out where all the other guys are? Why aren't you doing this?" Or I think just living strong as a witness, and I do wish looking back that I was more adamant about my faith. But there were definitely moments, to be able to share off camera, off script, off screen, just who I was and invite people into my life. And that's something that I've done ever since then, really, is inviting people into my life. And as I'm on the go, just bring people, that's discipleship. Bring people along the journey and find organic moments to just share your faith, share your ministry, share your life.
And I'm curious, just to that point, there's a lot of people that are involved in the church. They're on worship teams, but they're involved in playing in the local bars and doing different things. What are some practical things that you'd say? What are 3 things that you do in your personal life, even at that time, that kept you strong, kept you grounded? That you should. That would be good for them to do.
I love that you said 3 things because that's how I do all of my answers. I think wherever you are, God can use you. I have this true belief that we're called to redeem all things. So, whether I was playing in a bar or whether I was playing in a church, I was still a worship leader, So how do you keep centered on Jesus? I think you have to have a strong prayer life. I think you have to have a strong Bible life. You need to be in the Word as much as you can. And I think you need to have a strong worship life. If the only time I'm leading worship is when I have a microphone in front of me, I'm living a lie. I need to be in the basement. I need to be in those wilderness moments singing just as strongly as I am when I'm on a platform, on a stage. And so the root word of disciple is discipline. You need to have disciplines in your life to keep you grounded, to keep you rooted in the faith. So that way, wherever you're at, whether you're on the road, whether you're at home, whether you're in a bar or you're in a church, whether you're surrounded by tons of people, good influences and bad, or you're by yourself, your faith stands strong because you're rooted. And I think that's the thing that I've learned on the journey is just stay rooted,
Something that strikes me as particularly kind of powerful that you're talking about is the idea of inviting people into your life. I feel like that's something that we don't always talk about things in those terms, but that way of sharing your faith and your values and your strengths in a way, you know, like that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen if you don't invite people in, if you don't reach out to people and let them live alongside you, right? And like, and that's something that like that I think especially I think as all people, but I think especially men, you know, I could say Christian men, but I guess just guys in general, you know, inviting other guys into your life, living next to them and seeing each other, you know, calling each other out, discipling each other in all these different ways, sometimes very subtle ways. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the first step is allowing that person to come into your life. That's a pretty universal concept for everybody, but that really strikes me as you're talking about. That's the first step, and I think we so often miss that first step.
Well, I mean, it's the Great Commission. You know, Jesus said, go and make disciples. That's what he left his disciples to do. And we're standing 2,000 years later because somebody made a disciple who made a disciple who made a disciple. And it eventually reached us. And I think the modern word for discipleship is mentorship.
Sure.
You know, so who are you pouring into? Who's pouring into you? And I think, you know, sometimes we look at biblical concepts and we're like, we make it so much more complicated than it has to be.
Sure.
You know, Jesus had a simple gospel, right? And I think when you look at discipleship, it's like, I'm not qualified for that. If you know Jesus and you want to help someone know him a little bit more, that's discipleship. Bring them along the journey. So we had this thing in DC, it was called the Protege Program. And it was bringing in people for a year. It was basically a year-long ministry internship. But I didn't like set up class times or anything like that. I was like, hey, we're going to do rehearsal. Why don't you come with me? Or, hey, I'm going to do this songwriting session. Why don't you come with me? And, you know, my dad taught me this, but things are more caught than they are taught. And so, like, if you just have people in the room, I'm going to learn. That's how I learned how to produce.
Totally.
I was in the room with Akil Thompson. He's producing one of my first worship records. And I'm just watching him how he works on Logic. I'm watching this plugin. I'm watching how he does this guitar trick. And I learned how to produce by osmosis, really, being in the room with the right people. And I think you can do that with others. Share your life. Share your moments. Bring people along the journey with you.
So I just wrote with someone today, and she's a very young artist who's just starting out, and this was her second co-write. And she mentioned that her first co-write was on this retreat that she got to go on with all these different writers. But the thing you just said reminded me so much of what she said, which is she said as soon as she had that opportunity to like write with these other people, her own writing became so much better, and she started writing so many more songs on her own, you know. And that when you're around people that are exhibiting the behavior that either you're trying to emulate or you're just, like you said, catching, you're just kind of, you find yourself doing it, like that seeps into you. I think we could probably all think of things like that with us, where you never set out to change this about yourself, but it like a contagion. Like it
So
grabs
true.
you. Yeah, that's cool. Well, speaking of your affinity for 3 questions,
Nice.
we're gonna enter into our final segment of the show that we always do. Again,
Yes.
always.
Always.
Still true. It's true. We've done it twice.
Yeah.
2 out of 2.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about our pebble analogy. We call this show the ripple effect. After the idea of the fact that our art, our work, our content, whether it, is music or just your words or whatever work you do, affects other people in the world, like a pebble being dropped into a pond and how that creates effects. So we're going to ask you to kind of examine some things in your own work. We're going to be talking about the pebble, which is the content itself, the strengths and weaknesses. We're going to be talking about the height, the other element, which is the height from which that pebble is dropped, meaning the people that surround you and support you. And then the third element being the actual effect. So how your music actually influences other people. So Ian, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Joel. This is the point where we fist pump.
Were we hitting each other last time?
Oh yeah, we were.
Yeah.
But I hit you a lot harder last time. But
That's cool.
okay. So
It just got really violent. you
it
guys.
did.
You got violent
Forgive
last
me?
time,
I'm
too.
glad I was left out of
I
that.
forgive you.
Thanks. So the pebble, the content. Question is, what are the strengths of what you do? Like what do you feel is your strength in your content?
Well, my strength as a writer, as a leader, or whatever I do, if you have a room of 20 guys, I've never been the most talented in the room. I'm the guy who connects with as many people as often as I can. When everybody else on the songwriting retreat is in bed, I'm up late connecting with people and meeting people. I'm kind of like, somebody once called me the Energizer Bunny. Like, I'll just keep going, and I always try to bring energy into any room that I come into. So I think connecting and energy, just as far as my overall strength as a person, strength in my writing. I always thought of myself as a melody guy, but I've been coined by more people than not as a lyrics guy. And I think what it comes down to is just a deep love for Scripture. And so I want to take the Scriptures and morph them into singable lyrics. You know, so yeah. Does that answer the question?
I think it does. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So,
Yeah.
So moving on to the height of it.
The height.
So where do you feel like you need help and to depend on other people? Like, where are some areas that, you know, having that support, having that team, you know, where's that area for you?
Man, I think all of us need people that we've given permission to speak into our lives and call us out, make us better. So whether it was songwriting, and I had better songwriters that had permission to call me out, hey, that lyric's not as good as it can be, and you settled for it. Or whether it was writing a book and I had editors that were like, hey, this chapter doesn't make sense. Or whether I'm preaching a message and I run that through several filters and they're like, I didn't connect the dots here, you know. Don't be afraid to let people speak into your life. One of the greatest songs ever written is the Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. Right? That song started off with 80 verses. It ended up as 4 verses.
Wow.
It's called editing. Right? And so don't be afraid of editing. Don't be afraid of people coming in and chipping out the fat and leaving behind the gold. And I think it's like that way in our relationships and everything that we put our hands to. So I think for me, like that height, who are my, like, if you're Moses and you've got an Aaron and a Joshua holding up your arms, who are those people that do that? Number one, I would say, is my dad. My dad will call me every Monday after our Sunday service. He's like, hey, how'd it go this weekend? He's my coach, he's my champion, he's my cheerleader. And he's just somebody that I always know after that conversation, he's gonna make me better. The other person is Mark Batterson. He was my pastor in DC for 7 years. His books changed my life. Then I got to serve alongside him for 7 years. Wow. And it was like listening to, he's the closest representation I've ever seen of Jesus in action. I love him. He is a pastor through and through. He's who you read, and that's his real life. And he's still my pastor today. So Mark Batterson is definitely one of those guys. And then I just think, you know, in the course of songwriting, Aaron Keys has always been a friend and a voice in my life that I just, man, if Aaron's preaching it, I'm listening to it. You know, if he's podcasting, I'm tuning in. So, yeah, you need to all have voices in your life that are making you better than where you're currently at.
That's
Those are
awesome.
3. Yeah.
That's really good. And so the third and final thing, how do you hope Him Like is going to affect or influence the world around you?
I would love to see this album reach believers and churches all over the place. I grew up leading worship for the church. I've been a worship leader the majority of my life. I love being able to resource the church in any way I can. And so hopefully kind of taking some of these old songs and putting modern twists on them, hopefully it brings kind of new life to a lot of these songs, and they find pathways and avenues into churches all over the place. That's my main heart. Yeah. Because I think sometimes there's all different kinds of churches because there's all different kinds of people. There's some churches that will have a massive production scale, and then there's other churches where it's one guy on an acoustic that played in college, you know, like everything in between. And so I think the cool thing about this record is that we put our heart and soul into it, like producing, the parts are great. It's very, I mean, the guys at Old Bear, like they put their spin on it, Paul mixed it, it's incredible. So I feel like it has that appeal where like, yeah, if you've got the 12-piece band, you guys can rock it. But if you've got just a couple acoustics on stage, you can do the songs justice. And that was our goal with it. And so I think that's my aim, is to see it really just be a resource for the church. And it was fun. Like 3 or 4 months ago, I did a concert with these songs up in Richmond, Virginia, and we had a couple of people that were, we'll say elderly, 90 plus. They came out to the concert. I've never had a great-great-grandma come to a show before, but she said, I heard that there was a hymn sing-along. And, and it was just so cool, because I've got teenagers and I've got great-great-grandmas, and I think that was the beauty of hymns modernized. Like you've got the old and the young. You've got this multi-generational room filled with different stories of faithfulness, and that's the story of hymns right there.
That's awesome. Really, really awesome.
Those are terrific answers.
Yes.
I think.
That's fun, man.
We got another question.
We do.
Wait, were you about to ask?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, those questions were answered so well. I mean, I almost felt like you had something piped into your ear, or just like communicating.
My wife has been telling me everything. There's a
I
button
knew
right
there was
here.
a
There's a Word
secret.
doc
From Nipper's
open at
Corner.
home.
She's been telling me everything. She's Googling the right answer.
Okay. So Jim Sanders has a question for you.
Yeah.
First of all, he said he's so excited for your album, Hymn Like.
What?
And then his question is, what was the first hymn you remember hearing that really brought you to your knees, or one that is still especially important to you?
Wow. I Surrender All. That hymn is such it's always timely, because we always have something we need to surrender. I remember first singing that in DC, and it was one of those moments, leading a song, you don't know if you're leading it or being led, It was kind of a moment where the lyrics just struck where I was at in that season of my life. I was doing a lot of things in pride, and that song is all about humility. And so I think it was a timely message for me, and that was a song and a hymn that just jumped off the pages of those old hymn books right into my heart, and I'll never forget that moment. Yeah,
That's awesome. We have a third question coming in for Kurtis. Kurtis, how did you arrive at the album title Hymn Like? Now, we should be clear, it's the word hymn, Hymn, and then Like.
that's it.
That's the title. That's how, just in case people don't know.
Yeah. Did we figure out, is it double entendre or double entendre?
Double entendre.
Yeah, we got our French on earlier. Him like, so there is the hidden meaning of like obviously being like him, H-I-M. But I mean, the songs are hymns in their nature, but they've kind of taken on new legs. So that's why I named it Hymn Like. But also, I think all of our desire as Christians is to be Christ-like. And so there's kind of that I guess the theme throughout all of these songs is really just pointing to Jesus. One of the original hymns on the record is Set My Eyes on You. And the whole song is about just setting our eyes, fixing our eyes on the author and perfecter of our faith. And so yeah, hopefully by listening to some of these songs, it at least inspires us to want to be more like Jesus. That's the hope, really.
Yeah, sweet.
That's awesome. And there's actually a music video for that dropped this week.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. Can't say enough good things about it. In fact, there's 3 music videos off the project. So if you want to get like some previews of what's going to be on the album, there's 3 videos out right now, and 2 of them are live song sessions, I believe. And so definitely find those online. They're on the Old Bear page or on Kurtis's Facebook page, so you want to check those out. So I think at this point we're gonna be close to wrapping up the show tonight, and what we usually do is we provide a little bit of space to go ahead and allow each of us to promote something specific that's going on or that's coming up. We've been promoting Hymn Like, we've been doing that, but I know there's definitely some other things that are going on in your life right now, Kurtis, that you probably would want to talk about, probably want to promote to our audience. I know of one big thing especially.
Yeah, we launched a church
You did.
A month ago, Bridges, Nashville. Oh yeah. About a 1.5-year process of dreaming, praying, meeting with people, sharing a lot of vision. And September 16th, a little over 4 weeks ago, we launched a church downtown Nashville at the Listening Room Cafe. And it was amazing. 172 people came out that first Sunday. It's a new expression of the church where we teach through songs. And I preach in a TED style kind of a talk. And then we have space at the end that's modeled out of the Psalms. It's a moment called Selah, where we just sit in kind of instrumental ambient music and just really reflect on God's goodness. And it's been really cool. It's been the biggest challenge of my life. But man, when you see people connecting with Jesus, finding faith, I think 4 people gave their hearts to Christ in these 4 weeks. And so, man, if 4 eternities were what we can change in the right now, I think it's worth it, But we know that God is doing a lot, and there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. We just launched small groups this last weekend, and we're doing different things to serve Nashville, to love our city, and to just help people plug into community. So it's crazy. It's amazing. Yeah, bridgesnashville.com. You can find out a lot more about the church. And if you're in Nashville, you don't have a faith family, definitely come and check out Bridges Nashville Sundays at 10 o'clock at the Listening Room.
Awesome. And there's parking available right near the venue, which is awesome downtown.
The parking story, can I share that really quick?
Yeah, that's an incredible story.
I mean, do you believe in miracles, right?
I believe
Al Michaels.
Al Michaels, come on, we were talking about that earlier. So we knew we were going to be meeting at the Listening Room back in April. Any church that meets downtown, parking is your number one speed bump. And so we've been praying over this lot that was right across the street. And the owners of the venue and other people, they're like, we can never get in touch with the owners of this parking lot. They're just not responsive. And so we don't even know a number to give you. Well, 3 months ago, I was driving Lyft. And I usually turn the app off at around 10:30 in the morning and just get about my day. But I felt the Spirit prompting me to leave the app on. So I did. I got up out of the car, started walking around this park and just praying. And a ride pops up. So I go pick this guy up. His name's Adam. And I'm just talking to him, making small talk in the car. Hey, what do you do here in Nashville? Oh, I just moved down here. I'm in real estate. I said, what kind of real estate? He said, hotels and parking lots. I said, what parking lot do you own? And he goes, you ever heard of the Listening Room? I said, bro, God put you in my car today, man. And he goes, what? He started to freak out, grabbing for the handle. And I said, I'm launching a church at the Listening Room, and I've been praying over your parking lot for 4 months. And he said, here's my card, let's get together. So he quoted us a price. So 800,000 people in the greater Nashville area, the one guy that owns the lot, got in my car. That is providence. And then we talked a month later. It took a while to get a hold of him, but he talked a month later and he gave us a price, and I was like, man, there's no way we can do that. Like, we're a church plant. And so Caleb and I, Caleb's our campus pastor, we literally went to the parking lot and just prayed circles around it. Like we circled it in prayer and just said, God, would you let there be a miracle? Well, the next day we get a call from the guy, and after about another week of conversations, we get the price at a third of what he had quoted us originally. And so a week before we launched, we got our parking lot.
Amazing.
And I'm just telling you, like, God's timing is always awesome. And one lesson I've learned is that you can always slow down the process, you can never speed it up. And so you just got to trust in those moments. Like a week before we launched, you talk about stressing out, but God's like, I got you. This is my thing. So
wow, such a great story, man. So good.
I love that. I mean, he's so good.
Man, that was good. Well, that's awesome. So come to Bridges, 10 a.m. Listening Room on Sunday morning if you're in Nashville looking for a church. Joel, my brother.
Ian.
The punches.
So what's going on in your world? What do you want to promote tonight, my friend?
Same stuff as last time.
Okay.
I'll say it again.
Yes, please.
Carrollton, we just had a new, the Made for This EP dropped a couple weeks ago, and it's it's 4 new songs that are all just kind of fun. They're fun. They're aggressive. They're
rockers.
People listening to them on their way to like their kids' wrestling matches.
Yes.
And that's what we've been finding out. And so we've been doing that, and it was just a really, like I said, it was just we threw most of the usual kind of limitations off, and we just decided we're gonna make stuff that we are just gonna have an awesome time making, and our label was great with it too. And so anyway, so on Centricity Music record label, Carrollton, Made for This EP, and then We Are the Monks, this husband and wife duo, Trent Monk from Monk and Neagle. They just released the album that I've produced for them, the full length, 11-track album. last Thursday, I think, and so it's finally out. It's on iTunes and anywhere you get it online. Yeah, and they're on tour with us right now, so come see us over the next month. Carrollton with We Are the Monks.
Awesome.
Yeah,
It's a great record. I've heard it. Fully endorse it.
thanks, man.
Go get it. Stream it. Well, buy it first and then stream it.
Ian, what do you have?
Well, I'll tell you, there's a project that's coming out this Friday on Old Bear Records. It's the first instrumental album that's coming out on Old Bear Records by an artist named Ed Shalungu. He's an incredibly gifted, classically trained pianist who's created this sonically just spectacular album.
Wow.
He struggled with mental illness through a good portion of his life, but has been brought through many seasons of that, and just God is using his giftedness in just amazing ways. So we're really excited about that. So be on the lookout for that this Friday. Definitely check out the Old Bear merch store, which is www.oldbearrecords.merchnow.com. Again, that's oldbearrecords.merchnow.com, and you can find all kinds of different artist resources, T-shirts, CDs, and then definitely follow Carrollton, Kurtis, We Are the Monks, and the Old Bear Artists on Spotify. Stream it, add it to your playlist. We would sincerely appreciate it. So having said all of that, we've got some exciting news to share.
Oh, yeah. I almost forgot the exciting news. I'm so glad. Yeah. This week, Ian and I started recording the Ripple Effect podcast.
Yes.
And so that's going to be coming your way on October 22nd. That'll be the release date of our first episode. And it's so far, it's just the two of us. We're going to be having even longer discussions usually than these ones. They're going to be all over the place. So get ready.
We've done some. We did one on co-writing the other day.
Yeah.
We did one on overproduction and underproduction and tasteful production, and so we're doing a whole lot of different interesting things. So
we're trying to kind of. This is more of an opportunity instead of interviewing someone else. We're just talking about a lot of nuts and bolts stuff when it comes to making music, producing music, writing music, that kind of thing, and our influences and stuff that we love.
For sure.
And so so if you're a music lover, tune into that. You'll get something out of it, especially if you're someone who's just starting out in Nashville or somewhere else who's trying to break into like co-writing or producing or that kind of thing. There's a lot of stuff that we talk about with that, and our goal with it really is to just kind of give you the keys and give you permission to start contributing and to start creating and getting rid of some of those invisible barriers that you think surround you and are in your way. So
absolutely. So October 22nd, look for that on Apple, on your podcast.
iTunes, and we'll be posting about it. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Kurtis, thanks again for joining us tonight, man. We're excited about your project.
Kurtis Parks.
Yeah.
October 19th, him like dropping.
Dropping like it's hot.
Yes, in the most sacred and holy of ways.
That's true. Yes.
So we always end every episode with our little motto.
We are.
So if you're tuning in for the first time, if you stuck with us till the end, then we're going to just share it with you.
Yep.
And we didn't really even figure out how we're going to cue each other to say this. So, I mean,
Here goes.
It's what it is. Ready?
This is us signing off. Plop, plop, little pebbles.
See you next
See you
time.
next time.